Welcome back to Conversations for the Good. Hello, Dr. Jane.
Hello, Anna. How are you today?
I'm doing great, and I was really looking forward to our conversation today as we continue to explore what it takes to have a strong, positive relationship to our health. Let's include the factors that have over a lifetime influenced how we think about our health and the pursuit to be our best selves.
Well, Anna, this is such an important track, because to identify and personalize our relationship to health, we really need to see the broader context because our relationship has everything to do with our beliefs and our conditioning and our backstory, as we've said before. But we're part of a bigger picture, and this includes really the cultural evolution of health that we were exposed to. So we hopefully can extract this information and use it to self-discover, really kind of turn toward ourselves and assess where we are and consider other options and maybe make changes if we choose to.
Yeah, I know that there are areas that we've tapped into in other conversations that we've had. When I think about it, of course, our relationship to health would necessarily include what we're taught in our families, schools, churches, and the many personal experiences that we've had as adults.
Yes, that's right. And I also need to highlight that when most people are asked about their health, they tend to think about their physical health. And also, in regards to their physical health, kind of the absence of disease. And yet, both the word health and healing have the Germanic root of whole person, and in the case of healing, to make whole.
Yeah. Well, this is a model that has come up in our conversations. I know many times, the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual.
That's right. And as we explore our personal relationship to health, I'm hoping that we can really embrace the whole person philosophy and be open to cultivating ideas to incorporate these options into our daily lives and create doable action plans, really allow ourselves to be committed to making choices. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah. So the root of health and healing means whole person, as in holistic, correct?
That's right. That's right. And there's a rich world history of interdisciplinary medicine that has sought to really include these dimensions, as a whole person, and target the many dimensions, social, psychological, mental, behavioral, and really look at how they affect the bodily processes. There's some history of this kind of approach that dates back to medieval times. Medieval Islamic medicine really looked at the whole person. They were always about mind body connections to health and also, how the body reacts and the mind reacts together that causes illness. So they were way back in medieval times looking at the whole person.
How interesting, that the mind body health goes back that far.
That's right. It really is. Interestingly enough, though, in Western culture, we really misplaced this concept right around the 17th century, thanks to a philosopher by the name of Rene Descartes. And he posited the theory that really disassembled the whole person. He said that we are individual parts, mind, body, and soul. And accordingly, then, each of these parts would require a different professional to assist and intervene if there were ever problems. So it was the physician that dealt with the body, and it was the psychiatrist or analyst that dealt with the mind. And the clergy certainly were the individuals who dealt with the soul or the spirit. And the key was everybody stay in your own lane. So the return to mind body medicine and the whole holistic or whole person view has really had a very slow return in Western medicine, starting back in the 1930s with a theory called psychosomatic medicine. And as I say, it started in the 1930s, but it really stalled out in the 1950s and 1960s because of lack of scientific evidence.
evidence, like what kind of evidence are we saying?
Well, at the time, psychosomatic medicine was really based on theory and what we call anecdotal evidence, which uses personal experiences to illustrate, various points. Whereas empirical evidence, which is considered hard science, is evidence that is measurable, it's unbiased, and we're able to replicate it. So relying on science-based empirical evidence is considered really the best practice in a science of medicine.
So without the science to back it up, it's difficult to keep a major movement like this going in a forward direction.
Well, that's exactly right. We were in the midst of a paradigm shift, but the science to support it was very, very slow in coming. A lot of it had to do with funding. Also, there were clearly differences in research design because you're dealing with human subjects. And also there was a question of, how do you accurately measure mental or emotional impacts on the physiology, on the body?
Yes, I guess it's a different ballgame when you can't figure out what to put under the microscope or can't obviously see it in another way.
Well, that's right. So the science was kind of stalled out. But what was interesting is that the whole mind body movement began to be fueled in the 1970s with a surge of best selling books, which provided vivid testimony, both personal and professional, but however, it was all still anecdotal. But these works encouraged the reader to be more involved in their healthcare and really take back their power and control and develop relationships. A real partnership with their physicians so that medical decisions were more collaborative. There was a book that came out in the early 70s by the name of Anatomy of an Illness. It was by Norman Cousins. And it really revolutionized how people were thinking about healthcare because Norman Cousins claimed that he had cured himself of a chronic disease by making lifestyle changes and having regular doses of comedy, humor. He watched the Marx Brothers. So, as I say, this caused the beginning of a revolution, people taking charge of their health and demanding to be in partnership with their physicians. Carolyn Mace came out with a book by the name of Why People Don't Heal. And what she was talking about is she said, our biology or our biography becomes our biology. And she used a term woundology. And what she was talking about is exploring how our beliefs about ourselves tends to play out in our health. So there were a myriad of books that came out talking about how a health crisis can change your life, how it really allows you to see the toxic components in your life. Books came out around how to be an exceptional patient, how to survive and thrive a terminal diagnosis. It was a pretty incredible time because all of these works really carried a powerful message that we were looking to evolve in a totally different way. And they explored conscious choices that we can make for ourselves and also with our health providers. Changes and choices like nutritional changes, lifestyle changes, nutritional changes, balancing our stress, changing our relationships, facing and quelling addictions. These were all patterns that we needed to look at that could compromise our immune system.
How interesting. It seems like that the general public helped to push things forward even without the science.
Well, that's absolutely right, except for the fact that this was going on in the general public, but many of the professionals practicing Western medicine remained skeptical without the science based on empirical evidence. So another issue is that when empirical evidence does surface in the science community, sometimes it takes a long time to get to the general public in a digestible form, something that we can understand. But this also began to change. We're, in the 70s and in the 80s, we started to see some evidence come forth, and it was, again, through popularized books that we began to, as a general public, really see and use this new information. Candace Pert and her team at Johns Hopkins, they discovered the opioid opioid receptors. And what this amounted to was we were able to see that there was a biomolecular component to emotions. And there were also people like Redford Williams, who was able to put together the correlation between anger and coronary heart disease. And a fellow by the name of Bruce Lipton began to, through cellular biology, talk about the fact that DNA is not totally reliant on itself and the gene pool within the human species, that it really has to do with outside influences energized by our thoughts, both positive and negative. So it was an incredible time. And today, every major medical center has a department of whether it's integrated health, holistic health, functional medicine. We see it everywhere. Cleveland Clinic, Mayo Clinic, all of these disciplines treat the whole person. So it's, again, we're going back to the original meaning of what it is to have health and healing, including all the components of physical, psychological, emotional, spiritual, and all of these play into the well-being. And treatment often includes lifestyle changes, corrections, not just pharmacological interventions and surgical interventions. So clearly there's been a paradigm shift. It doesn't mean that everybody's on board, though. Much of the traditional medical community remains skeptical and sometimes non-supportive. So it's not just about mind-body medicine that they're skeptical about, but any of the alternative therapies, things like acupuncture and chiropractic care, naturopathic and homeopathic medicine. Sometimes there's a lot of skepticism around those arenas.
Yes, there is. And I'm very familiar with this more holistic approach. It makes such perfect sense to me, but yet, I'm often outnumbered, Dr. Jane, by people who are much more indifferent to making healthy choices, especially if they're inconvenienced by it, or,
Sure.
or time consuming for them.
That's right. And as I mentioned, people think about their health as being physical and kind of the absence of disease. Not, not everybody is tuned into the mind-body evolution. A lot of people are tied into the traditional medicine, traditional Western medicine, and then there are some people who just aren't interested in health, or they may be in denial about their health or anybody else's health or what to do about their health, or maybe they have excuses or rationalizations or projections that enable them to ignore health issues. Sometimes if you're really healthy, you don't even think about it, if you don't have any real issues. But there's also, a shift in healthcare and how healthcare is perceived. There's a rising healthcare cost that really is more pronounced than it ever has been. And what this has done is it's kind of pulled in certain prejudices that are being perpetuated. Things like people with visible healthcare issues, are often held more responsible for their choices, in very judgmental ways. It's also about taking a look at, if we're making these choices, are we really, or should we really be part of the healthcare component that pays for that? So our beliefs and our backstory and our conditioning, tend to define and support issues like what is it to be healthy, and who's responsible for our health, and who should finance our health, and should we finance care of less responsible people, people who are maybe not being responsible, given that there are continuing to be raising healthcare costs higher and higher every year.
Yes, they certainly do, and there's some truth to that. Absolutely. I don't know, I don't want to be insensitive, but it is about choice, right?
Well, yes, but healthcare needs to kind of evolve over a lifetime. And very often as we say that, the choices have to do with what we've been exposed to, our beliefs and our conditioning, and influenced by the medical paradigms that we were exposed to. So sometimes the choices are unconsciously motivated to maintain our sense of comfort and safety, or they might have to do with our socioeconomic status, what we can afford, or whether or not we've been exposed to pertinent information. Education has a lot to do with it, or whether or not healthcare is available to us. What is the availability? So there are no simple answers, and why we don't attend to our health has a myriad of reasons, some of which are very complex, but certainly can be barriers, both conscious and unconscious.
Yeah, it's not always what it appears to be on the surface. Behind the symptom and the response to it is the history, conditioning, and the backstory.
Well, that's right. And I'm not wanting to make excuses for unhealthy behavior or enable unhealthy choices. I just want to point out that um, problems are often complex and more complex than they appear to be. And to change requires that we wake up to the issues around our health. And many remain unconscious, to all these dimensions until faced with something that happens that may trigger the need to change. Things like maybe our choice gets us into trouble, whether it's with family or with the healthcare providers or coworkers or even the police. Um, Maybe our choice causes a critical crisis within our own healthcare, or maybe someone else goes through a healthcare crisis, or even, you know, faces death, and sometimes that causes us to wake up, or our choice no longer provides the comfort and safety, or sometimes we just get sick and tired of being sick and tired and want to feel better, you know, or sometimes there's just kind of this spontaneous awakening, I want to have a different life and I want my health to be part of it. It's a tough road to change healthcare patterns, and one of the things we know from research is about 50% or more of people with chronic problems are not compliant with their doctor's orders. They're not doing what they are prescribed to do, and the failure rate is much higher with weight management and also with recovery from addictions. So we're not looking to shame or blame the individual, but rather kind of highlight the whole person. The mind, body, soul practice really requires consistent personal investment. Awareness, time, energy, it's all important.
Yeah. Yeah, we've done a big brushstroke here. It's really, put our mind, body, spirit relationship with health in a broader perspective, I think.
Yes, and the evolution of mind, body, health, and medicine has had a major impact, in our culture, as well as our personal beliefs and healthcare practices.
Dr. Jane, where now?
Well, I think it's important for us to continue this conversation, Anna, because today we just kind of really provided that, as I said, that broad brushstroke of what has influenced us according to what we've been exposed to. But it's important that we continue to kind of fine tune what it means personally. So in the meantime, I would consider, that we take a look at with real kindness and curiosity, kind of ask the following questions, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being healthy, very healthy, and 1 being unhealthy, to really rank, how do we see ourselves, within the different dimensions of the mind body paradigm, how do I see myself mentally, emotionally, relationally, spiritually? What about occupationally or even recreationally? How do I have fun? Are my leisure time activities healthy? The other thing is, um, do I desire to improve my mind body health? And am I ready to make a real healing intention to improve my health? And sometimes even writing a personal health mission statement can be enormously helpful because it's actually committing to paper, what do I want? What do I need to do? Who am I doing it for? And lastly, to take a look at what of all my health concerns tends to be pulling at my attention? What really needs me to attend to it now?
This is so important, So the rank of the various mind, body, spirit aspects, check our desire and intentions, write our mission statement, and decide which health issue is a priority, correct?
That's right. Seems like a lot, but it's a start, it's a start.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to do it. And I'm sure you have inspired many others to do the same today, Dr. Jane. Thank you so much. Until our next conversation.